We all kind of know the difference, right? Between a selfless hero and, well, a self-consuming villain. Think about any big story, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. It often comes down to drawing power from devotion versus, fear and exhaustion.
That's a great way to put it.
But what if the real difference in your life, the line between burning out completely and being really resilient, wasn't about willpower? What if it was just about which bits of your brain are lighting up? Forget that whole idea that being nice or empathetic just drains you. We're going to dive deep into the actual neuroscience that shows real compassion. It's like the ultimate psychological power source. It's
Right.
basically a neural cheat code for helping people sustainably and like a real defense against stress.
That framing is spot on.
And welcome everyone to the deep dive. We've got this huge stack of research in front of us, all focused on the science behind compassion.
Wow. Yeah, it covers neurobiology, evolution, clinical psychology, fMRI data, you name it. So our mission today, and it's a big one, is to unpack all this evidence. We need to figure out precisely what compassion is, how our ancestors maybe selected for it, and crucially, what actually measurably happens in your brain and your body when you genuinely care.
Okay.
We really want to help you distinguish this sustainable superpower from its cousin, empathy, which, as you said, can be exhausting and the exciting part. You're going to see how you can literally train this, how you can biologically boost your own resilience.
All right, let's get that core definition down first, because the words here really matter, don't they? When researchers, the ones publishing in big journals like Nature Human Behavior or the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology,
Yeah.
when they talk compassion, it's specific.
Very specific. It's not just feeling bad for someone.
Right, not passive sympathy. Compassion is formally defined as, a sensitivity to suffering in yourself and others, plus a commitment to try and alleviate and prevent it. That commitment part, that's huge.
Absolutely vital.
It needs three things for it to be, active. First, you got to notice the suffering, awareness. Second, a benevolent emotional response, like actual warmth and concern.
Yeah, not distress, warmth.
And third, the desire or motivation to actually help relieve or prevent it. It's got this built-in action component.
Exactly. If you just have the first two, you notice it, you feel concerned, but you don't have that motivation to act, that's more like sympathy. Compassion is where concern turns into, measurable, goal-directed motivation.
Okay, so that leads to the big question. If caring is human, and if compassion is this adaptive tool built into us, why do so many people who care deeply, nurses, teachers, first responders, why do they burn out so badly?
Yeah.
Why does trying to help sometimes feel so draining that people just quit or get morally injured?
This is probably the single most critical point we'll cover, the scientific distinction here. It can literally be life-saving for people in those professions. It boils down to feeling with someone versus feeling for someone. And that difference, it dictates which parts of your brain fire up.
Okay, like a pre-flight checklist for emotional survival. So what happens with just pure empathy?
Right. So empathy is feeling with the other person. You're basically sharing their experience emotionally and cognitively, almost like it's yours.
You mirror them.
You mirror them, exactly. Through mirror neuron systems and related pathways. So if they're distressed, your brain mirrors that distress. Now, this is fundamental for bonding, obviously. But when you're faced with intense suffering or suffering that goes on, this mirroring can become overwhelming. And that leads directly to what scientists call empathic distress.
So you're not just getting their pain, you're kind of experiencing it yourself, functionally speaking.
Precisely. You're lighting up the pain and distress networks in your own brain. Your sympathetic nervous system kicks in, shouting, "Threat! Threat!"
Okay, that sounds exhausting.
It is exhausting. Constant activation of these distress networks, feeling others' pain repeatedly, it just depletes your resources, leads to exhaustion, burnout. You're literally draining your psychological battery.
Okay, now flip it. Contrast that with compassion,
Yeah.
the state we're aiming for.
Right. Compassion is the shift. It's feeling for the other person.
Yeah.
You see their suffering, you feel genuine concern, but crucially, you keep that bit of separation you need to actually be helpful.
You don't get sucked in.
Exactly. Instead of mirroring their distress, your brain activates completely different circuits. One's designed for care, warmth, and motivation to help. This is the key. Empathy often leads to distress. Compassion generates positive emotions and sustainable, goal-directed helping.
That distinction. Wow, it changes the whole game. So if empathy is like falling into that emotional abyss with your friend, you both end up paralyzed by anxiety. Compassion is staying firmly on the edge, seeing how deep the abyss is, and then throwing them a rope. You're not drowning with them. You're focused on helping them climb out.
That's a perfect analogy. It maps directly onto the neurobiology. One state, empathy, when it turns into distress, lights up brain areas like the anterior insula and mid-cingulate cortex in a way that signals danger, pain. The other state, compassion, activates networks linked to reward, motivation, affiliation, and safety.
So it's like this fundamental choice point in the brain.
Yeah.
Do I hit the alarm system that says run away
Mm-hmm.
or shut down?
Yeah.
Or do I activate the system that says, okay, here's a chance to connect, to solve something? It feels like empathy is maybe the detection tool.
It gives you the data, yes.
But compassion is the required operating system to handle that data without crashing.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better. Empathy is the input. Compassion is the sustainable processing system. And the fact that compassion is sustainable, that's not luck. It's deeply embedded in our evolutionary past. It's really important to get that compassion isn't some, recent cultural invention. It evolved from the ancient mammalian pair-giving system.
The system for keeping babies alive?
That's the bedrock. Essential for offspring survival, parental motivation, care. You see it across mammals.
Right.
But what makes human compassion so different, and probably what let us cooperate and basically take over the planet, is that it stretched way beyond just caring for our own kids. Thanks to our fancy cognitive skills language, planning, thinking about others' minds, we became what some researchers call super carers.
Super carers. I like that.
We can feel genuine concern for total strangers for generations from now, even for other species. That's complex and pretty unique.
And evolution, you only keep stuff that works, that gives an edge.
Yeah.
So what were the specific adaptive advantages of compassion? Why was it worth the evolutionary effort?
Well, we see about 3 main functions that likely made compassion indispensable. First, like we said, facilitating that intense long-term care human babies need. They're helpless for ages.
Okay, me too.
Second one's really interesting. It's about mate selection, crucial for passing on genes.
Yeah.
Big cross-cultural studies, the kind you see in top journals, consistently find that things related to kindness and character, which are basically the behavioral results of compassion, are ranked incredibly highly when people choose long-term partners, often higher than looks or money.
Wait, really? So that whole nice guys finish last thing,
Yeah.
it's actually evolutionary nonsense? Kindness is sexy in the long run.
From an evolutionary perspective, absolutely. The hypothesis is that compassionate partners were preferred because they signaled, hey, I'm more likely to stick around, invest in the kids, and be a reliable, cooperative partner.
Wow.
Choosing someone kind literally meant better survival odds for your children, for your lineage. It's a deep, ancient survival calculation driving our choices, much deeper than just surface attraction. Compassion signals commitment.
Yeah, it's powerful. Okay, what's the third function?
The third links up with something called reciprocal altruism theory. The idea here is that compassion evolved to motivate us to help non-relatives, specifically in relationships where we could expect help back later.
The I scratch your back, you scratch mine principle, but driven by genuine feeling.
Exactly. Compassion helps us start, maintain, and regulate those vital cooperative bonds. Think of it as the emotional glue for society.
Yeah, that tracks. Our whole emotional toolkit, compassion, but also gratitude when someone helps us, anger at cheaters, guilt when we mess up. It all seems designed to keep us playing the cooperation game fairly.
Precisely. It makes sure that if I help you out today, you feel motivated, maybe through gratitude, to help me tomorrow. Without compassion kicking off that initial helpful impulse and the other emotions keeping score, large-scale cooperation, the very basis of human civilization, probably wouldn't work. It's the engine.
Okay, this is where it gets really wild. The mechanics. The biological proof that caring isn't supposed to be draining. Let's talk brain scans. If empathy lights up the stress paths, what happens when you shift into compassion? Where's the action in those fMRI studies?
This is the discovery that just flips the whole burnout narrative on its head. Neuroimaging confirms it. Compassion activates a totally distinct network in the brain, beautifully separate from the distress or pure mirroring networks of empathy. You can literally see it on the screen.
Okay, lay it in on us. Where?
So a big meta-analysis, pulling together data from 16 different fMRI studies on compassion, consistently found peak activation in a few key spots. Think of it as the brain's altruism control center.
Ooh, I like that.
We're talking areas like the periaqueductal gray, the anterior insula, the anterior cingulate cortex, ACC, you mentioned that one before, and the inferior frontal gyrus.
Yeah, the ACC. We talked about that with conflict resolution, right? How does it fit with compassion?
Right. The ACC is a major hub. Here, it gets really active during compassion training, even for beginners. It's key for detecting emotions, integrating those gut feelings, those bodily responses to emotion. It makes sure the info seeing someone suffer gets noticed and prioritized, but critically, without collapsing straight into distress mode.
And the anterior insula.
That's mapping the body's response, giving you that physical sense of the emotional state. But studies on, like expert meditators, show that during compassion, this mapping happens with a sense of calm, regulated concern, not alarm bells ringing.
Okay. Now, the part that sounds like science fiction, the wow fact, the reason compassion is sustainable, maybe even energizing, the dopamine connection.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
This is the absolute clincher, the definitive difference. Compassion uniquely taps into the brain's mesolimbic reward pathway.
The reward pathway, like the pleasure circuits.
Exactly. These are the structures driving motivation, positive feelings, learning what's good. We're talking the big players, the nucleus accumbens, NAC, the ventral tegmental area, VTA, and the medial orbitofrontal cortex, MOFC.
Okay, let's break that down for folks. The NAC, that's often called the pleasure center, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the main output hub for reward, the VTA. That's like the dopamine factory. It pumps dopamine to the NAC. And the MOFC helps figure out how valuable that reward is. These areas are packed with dopamine receptors. They light up when you achieve something, eat amazing food, feel safe, connected. They basically tell your brain, yes, do more of that.
So, hold on. If I genuinely help someone, or even just successfully shift my mindset towards compassion when I'm stressed,
Yeah.
my VTA starts sending dopamine to my NAC, and my brain literally says, whoa, that felt good. Let's do that again.
That is precisely what the science is showing. This specific reward-based activation pattern, that's what fundamentally distinguishes compassion from empathy, which, remember, hits the pain and distress networks.
Okay, mind blown.
Instead of feeling drained or pained, you're experiencing positive affect, satisfaction, reinforcement. The MOFC, for instance, gets more active during compassion meditation. That suggests your brain is putting a higher intrinsic value, like a cognitive reward tag, on helping others suffer less. It's literally valuing it as a good investment.
Which makes being kind not just sustainable, but inherently motivating.
Yeah.
It becomes its own reward loop.
Absolutely, a positive feedback loop. And it gets even cooler when you look at neuroplasticity, the brain changing itself. Research shows that after regular compassion training, the nucleus accumbens actually shows increased connectivity with the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the DLPFC.
Whoa. The DLPFC, that's like the brain's CEO, right? Executive function, planning. What does connecting the reward center to the planning center mean for us?
It looks like the neurological basis for sustainable altruism. This stronger NAC-PFC connection directly correlates with people actually behaving more altruistically in real-world tests later on.
No way.
Yes. It means that rewarding feeling, the dopamine hit from the NAC, is now directly informing and boosting your planning and self-control centers in the PFC. It suggests training literally rewires your brain circuits to make helping the default rewarding option instead of something costly or effortful. And get this, studies have even documented actual physical changes like structural thickening in brain regions like the dorsomedial prefrontal cortex and the temporal parietal junction after these compassion practices. These are areas critical for taking someone else's perspective and keeping your own emotional state separate.
So we're not just changing how we feel, we're physically upgrading our brain's hardware to be more functional, resilient, and better planners when dealing with emotions. That really is the neural cheat code. Okay, that brain rewiring is just incredible. But let's zoom out from the brain itself to the rest of the body. Our chemistry, our heartbeats. If compassion taps the reward system, what does that feel like physically? What's the signature in the body?
Well, the physiological signature of compassion is pretty much the opposite of the fight or flight stress response. And that's key to why it builds resilience. Let's start with the chemistry, specifically oxytocin, this so-called love hormone.
Right.
Researchers talk about the oxytocin saliency hypothesis.
Saliency, meaning it makes things stand out more, not creates the feeling itself.
Exactly right. Oxytocin doesn't seem to directly cause compassion. Instead, it boosts the saliency, the noticeability of distress cues. It's like a biological spotlight saying, hey, pay attention, this person's suffering.
Ah, okay.
This heightened attention then triggers the compassionate, caregiving response, assuming you're feeling grounded enough to respond that way. And studies back this up. Give people oxytocin, and they actually get better at recognizing fear in others' faces and report feeling more empathy and compassion. Those fear cues are exactly what tend to elicit care.
Interesting.
Though it's worth noting, oxytocin seems to mainly boost these pro-social feelings towards people we see as part of our in-group. It's not always universally warm and fuzzy. It mostly enhances care for us.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so oxytocin primes us. How does that affect the nervous system? Does the body still hit the alarm button when we see suffering?
No, and this is the crucial health difference. Empathic distress, that slams the accelerator. Sympathetic nervous system kicks in, heart pounds, breathing gets shallow, muscles tense. Fight or flight.
Right.
But compassion, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system the body's brakes. Your heart rate actually slows down.
Slows down while focusing on suffering. That seems counterintuitive.
It does, but it reflects a state of calm, focused attention, readiness to connect, not readiness to flee. And research consistently shows compassion training increases heart rate variability, or HRV.
HRV, lots of people track that with fitness devices now. Remind us why high HRV is good in this context.
Sure. HRV is just the natural variation in time between your heartbeats. Higher variability means your system is more flexible, adaptable, better regulated. It's a solid marker of a healthy parasympathetic response. So when you're compassionate, you're physiologically in a state of calm readiness, not defensive mobilization. Dr. Barbara Fredrickson's work shows these positive emotions generated by compassion literally help undo the physical effects of stress.
So it calms you down, makes you more flexible.
Yes, and this ties into what researchers call the tendon-befriend response. Often discussed in relation to women under stress, but really applicable to anyone in a caregiving mode. It's an alternative to fight or flight.
Tandem befriend.
Yeah, instead of fighting or fleeing, you tend to offspring or those in need, and you befriend others seeking social support. This whole response promotes safety, connection, cooperation. It actively lowers stress hormones like cortisol and builds resilience. It's about calming yourself and connecting to protect the group.
And we can actually measure this anti-stress effect, like with biomarkers.
Oh, absolutely. We have hard data. Studies show even short-term self-compassion training can reduce salivary alpha amylase. That's an easily measured marker linked to sympathetic fight-or-flight activation. It boosts that beneficial HRV we talked about, and people report lower anxiety scores. Plus, people high in self-compassion show less of a sympathetic nervous system flare-up and lower inflammatory responses when they do face stress. So it buffers the damaging long-term effects of chronic stress on your heart, your immune system. It's a real physical defense mechanism.
Okay, we've established compassion as this, like, evolutionarily awesome, dopamine rewarding, stress-busting, physically healthy superpower. So the big question is, if it's so great, why isn't everyone just doing it all the time? And how do we actually train ourselves to tap into it instead of getting stuck in that draining empathy loop?
Right, and that's where modern psychology comes in. We now have actual frameworks for training compassion, making it less of a vague ideal and more of a learnable skill set. We can start with Paul Gilbert's model. He sees compassion as built from 6 distinct trainable competencies. It's like a blueprint.
6 competencies. Okay, what are they?
Gilbert splits them into 2 groups, 3 for engagement and 3 for action. Engagement means, first, you need sensitivity. You have to notice the suffering.
Right. Second, sympathy. You have to feel some concern. Third, and this is crucial, distress tolerance. You need the ability to stay present with that suffering without getting overwhelmed yourself.
Ah, okay. If you feel it but can't handle it, you just shut down.
Exactly. You need that tolerance to move to the action skills. Those are non-judgment. Empathy used here more like the cognitive ability to understand their viewpoint. And finally, caring, which is the active motivation to help.
That makes so much sense. You need the whole chain. Sensitivity without tolerance is burnout waiting to happen.
Precisely. And Gilbert really stresses that building compassion requires building up psychological resources too. Things like feeling capable, confident, optimistic. If you don't feel you can help, or if you're afraid of compassion itself, afraid of being drained or getting hurt, those fears will block you. So you need those internal resources to overcome the perceived cost. Okay, that's the outward focus. Now, let's turn inward. Self-compassion. This seems absolutely critical for resilience, especially in those tough jobs. Kristen Neff's work comes up a lot here.
Yes, Kristen Neff's framework is incredibly influential. It's all about directing that compassionate impulse towards yourself, which is arguably the foundation for preventing burnout. Her model has 3 main parts, each with a positive side we want to increase and a negative side we want to reduce.
Okay.
We want more self-kindness, more common humanity, and more mindfulness. And, at the same time, less self-judgment, less isolation, and less over-identification with negative stuff.
Let's make that concrete. Say you just bombed a huge presentation at work. Your inner critic is going nuts. How does Neff's model help right then?
Great example. Okay, the immediate reaction is probably self-judgment. You idiot, you failed.
Yep, sounds familiar.
Neff says shift to self-kindness. Acknowledge it. Ouch, that hurts. This is tough. I need to be gentle with myself right now instead of beating yourself up.
Okay.
Then comes isolation, that awful feeling, I'm the only one who screws up this badly. You counter that with common humanity. Remind yourself, wait, everyone messes up. Even the people I admire have failed spectacularly at times. This is part of being human. It's not just me.
That common humanity piece that feels huge, like the ultimate shame buster.
It really is. It just dissolves that wall of shame. Finally, you've got over-identification. That's when you get stuck in the misery loop, feeling like this one failure defines your whole identity.
Yeah, catastrophizing.
Exactly. You counter that with mindfulness. Step back, observe the painful feeling and the harsh thoughts without getting swept away. You say, okay, I'm noticing a strong feeling of failure and I'm noticing critical thoughts. But I am not the failure itself. These are just experiences passing through. And the research, it strongly backs this up. High self-compassion is linked with moderate to large effects to lower rates of depression, anxiety, stress, even suicidal thoughts. It's a measurable defense.
So how do we actually apply this? What are the real-world interventions clinics use to, like, rewire these circuits?
Well, the most common and well-studied methods are meditation-based. Specifically, compassion meditation and loving-kindness meditation, or LKM.
LKM, yeah, I've heard of that.
These aren't just fuzzy spiritual things. They're systematic mental training exercises. You actively cultivate feelings of warmth, care, goodwill, often starting with someone easy, like a loved one, then yourself, then neutral people, and eventually even people you find difficult.
Ah, so you're deliberately practicing flexing that compassion muscle.
You're systematically activating and strengthening those reward circuits we talked about, the NADAC pathways. Then clinically, there's compassion-focused therapy, or CFT, developed by Paul Gilbert.
From the 6 competencies model.
Exactly. CFT is really effective, especially for people struggling with deep shame and self-criticism, often rooted in tough childhood experiences. It helps them build an internal compassionate self to manage their threat systems and learn self-seething. We see real improvements in self-compassion, self-criticism, depression, even things like eating disorders with CFT.
Okay, let's bring it back to the workplace, especially healthcare, where we started. You mentioned compassion fatigue versus burnout. Can you unpack that difference again? Why is it important to distinguish them?
Yeah, this is so important for professionals. Burnout is generally seen as a workplace issue. Exhaustion, cynicism, feeling ineffective, often tied to systemic problems like too much bureaucracy, lack of support, bad management.
Right, the system's broken.
Compassion fatigue is more specific. It's defined as the cost of caring. It's the emotional and physical exhaustion that comes from repeatedly connecting with and empathizing with the suffering of patients or clients. It's directly tied to the emotional labor of caring and can lead to secondary traumatic stress.
Ah, so burnout is more about the job conditions, while compassion fatigue is about the emotional toll of connecting with suffering.
Precisely. Burnout might need systemic fixes, like better staffing. Compassion fatigue, because it's often driven by that empathic distress loop, responds really well to compassion-based training. Teaching healthcare workers mindfulness and compassion skills helps them maintain sustainable caring. Research shows this kind of training reduces their secondary trauma symptoms, boosts job satisfaction, and even improves how they interact with patients. Investing in their compassion skills is literally an investment in better care. Now, while the basic brain wiring for compassion seems universal, we all have the hardware, so to speak, how it gets expressed, how useful it's seen to be, even how desirable it is. That varies a lot depending on culture.
Right, the cultural software running on the universal hardware.
You got it. Cross-cultural studies show some interesting nuances. For example, collectivistic cultures, common in East Asia, might place a stronger emphasis on outward compassion, on prioritizing the group's harmony and well-being. Whereas more individualistic Western cultures, which really value the independent self, might find it easier or more natural to focus on self-compassion. Even things like how acceptable it is to show vulnerability plays a role in how compassion is offered or received.
So you can't just drop a one-size-fits-all training program anywhere.
Absolutely not. Interventions need careful adaptation. There's this concept, affect valuation theory, that helps explain why some cultures might prefer interventions focusing on positive feelings, like recalling comforting memories, rather than directly naming or dwelling on painful feelings when responding to suffering.
Interesting.
Yeah, so you can't just take a Western model like CFT and expect it to work perfectly everywhere. Researchers stress how important it is to adapt these things, considering local factors like power dynamics, religious beliefs, collective versus individual focus. You need to make sure the training feels culturally relevant and safe.
That makes sense. Personalized training, not just biologically, but culturally too. Okay, let's look ahead. The cutting edge. How is technology getting involved in training this fundamental human skill?
Tech is definitely stepping in, helping us practice and personalize compassion training. One big area is virtual reality, VR.
VR for compassion, how does that work?
Well, you can create these really immersive VR environments for practicing things like compassion meditation, or you could simulate scenarios like encountering someone in distress, but in a safe, controlled space. This lets people practice that crucial shift, noticing distress, but consciously activating compassionate motivation instead of getting overwhelmed over and over again.
Like a flight simulator for emotions.
Kinda, yeah. And then there's AI and machine learning. They're getting really good at analyzing complex patterns in how people respond emotionally and cognitively.
Like the goal there.
Two main things. First, figuring out which training methods work best for different types of people based on how they perform. Second, predicting how an individual might respond to a particular intervention, like, are you someone prone to high empathic distress, or do you struggle more with the motivation part? AI could help tailor the training to your specific profile.
Wow. So like precision medicine, but for mental training. My compassion practice customized to my brain, my history.
That's exactly where it's heading. Personalized, compassionate interventions that factor in genetics, personality, your attachment background, maybe even baseline brain scans.
Yeah.
We could tweak that loving-kindness meditation practice to specifically maximize, say, that NX-PFC connectivity for your unique brain wiring.
Incredible.
And finally, the research is also scaling up, looking beyond just the individual to compassion at the societal level. What's its role in social justice movements, in tackling climate change, in reducing political polarization? Understanding how compassion operates not just inside one head, but across groups and systems, that's a huge frontier for building more resilient, maybe even more functional societies.
Okay, this deep dive. It's really flipped the script on what it means to be strong and resilient, emotionally speaking. Let's nail down the key takeaways for everyone listening. Takeaway 1, that distinction is crucial. Compassion is not the same as empathy. Empathy, unchecked, can hijack your distress circuits and lead straight to burnout. Compassion activates your brain's reward system, dopamine, making caring sustainable. Got to learn to feel for others with grounded concern, not get swept away with them in their pain. Takeaway 2, your wiring can work for you. Compassion isn't just a nice idea, it's a trainable skill that physically rewires your brain. It strengthens those reward pathways, ENIAC, VTA, and improves real physiological markers like heart rate variability. It's an actual science-backed shield against chronic stress, not just, being polite. Takeaway 3, it starts within. Cultivating self-compassion, using tools like Kristen Neff's framework, focusing on self-kindness, remembering common humanity, using mindfulness. This is the scientifically proven foundation. It's the prerequisite for being a sustainable supercarer out in the world without depleting yourself.
Yeah, the science really couldn't be clearer on this. Compassion isn't some soft skill or a philosophical nice-to-have. It's a fundamental human capacity. It has measurable effects on your brain structure, your physical health, how you interact with others. It gives us a real, evidence-based, dopamine-fueled strategy for building resilience in a world that feels increasingly stressful and overwhelming.
So, here's the final thought to chew on. If compassion is our best evolutionary strategy for cooperation, and if we can now measure it, train it, even enhance it with neuroscience and tech, what happens when we start seriously trying to optimize entire systems, hospitals, schools, maybe even governments, not just for efficiency or profit, but for sustained, measurable, biological compassion? What kind of society does that collective neural upgrade actually build? Keep digging, and we'll catch you next time.